In this video, let's talk about Picturing the Past, which is an exclusive short story depicting an event in AERITH'S childhood. There will be spoilers ahead, so please be aware. Let's get on. This story can be found in the back of the Final Fantasy VII Remake World Preview book. It's written by Kazushige Nojima, who is a renowned Japanese video game writer. In addition to writing this story, he was a scenario writer on Final Fantasy VII and many other games as well. While Tetsuya Nomura is credited with coming up with the idea of AERITH'S death, Kazushige Nojima was the one who actually wrote the script for those scenes. The story is really well written. It almost feels like the story plays out backwards, where at the beginning you know very little, and the main character goes on this journey almost like a detective style, trying to uncover certain facts, and little by little the story becomes clearer and clearer until we reach the end. I made a video a while ago on the Final Fantasy VII Remake World Preview book, but I urge you to check it out. I highly recommend reading this story, because it's a really good story and it's told in a really interesting way. I'll leave a link to the book in the description below. So the story jumps back and forth between flashbacks and the present, but in this video I want to focus in on the story of Aerith. And the story is told from the point of view of a main character who I don't believe they ever reveal his name. So to prepare for this video, I read through the story at least 2 times, but I just started referring to him as the Shinra Trooper, or ST for short. So a lot of the flashbacks take place when Aerith was 7 years old, and she was being held in a room at the Shinra building with her mother Ifalna, and they were both known to be ancients. So every morning at 10 a.m. this man named Geddy Bach would come in to pick up Ifalna and escort her to the laboratory.
Every morning they'd come and take my mom away. I remember crying here alone.
And they would perform quote-unquote research and experimentation on Ifalna. So every time that happened, Aerith would become impatient.
No! Go away!
Frustrated. I'm sure she felt fearful every time that her mom left the room, especially when no one really knew the extent of whatever that research entailed. I mean, the only ones who really knew were presumably Professor Hojo and the ones performing the research. But if you weren't high up, you really didn't know. And especially Aerith had no idea. Being 7 years old, she would get angry at Geddy Bach because he was the one who took her mom away from her every morning. And then every time Ifalna came back, she would look tired. There was an instance in the book where Ifalna came back to the room and blood was seeping into the bandage wrapped around Ifalna's wrist. Her eyes were described as hollow and sunken. Whatever the research they were performing, it was exhausting for Ifalna. I'm sure it was painful, uncomfortable. So that takes a toll on Ifalna's health, her mental and emotional health. That definitely has a negative effect on Aerith as well. So Geddy Bach and ST's mother both held clerical positions within the R&D department at Shinra. And ST's mother had been tasked with looking after Ifalna and her daughter. So ST kind of became Aerith's playmate. So one day, Aerith was laughing a lot at a silly story that his mother was telling her about a monster rat, and ST was trying to explain what the rat's tail looked like. So he was trying to show her a drawing of a coil, and all of a sudden Aerith let out a guttural cry. So Aerith then grabbed a pen and then started drawing ferociously. A person's face, a tree, a flower, an animal, a monster maybe. She drew more figures, one after another, and the page was gradually covered in black ink. So ST's mother notifies the surveillance camera, and then soon Geddy comes inside, followed by a bunch of people with white coats, and then Professor Hojo. But Aerith continues to draw as though she's like possessed. And Professor Hojo asks, "Aerith, can you see something?" Aerith nodded and said, "I can see things. I can hear them." So Hojo lets out a creepy laugh and then says, "Aerith has awakened." So if you're familiar with the lore of Final Fantasy VII, President Shinra is like obsessed with finding this promised land. One character in this story refers to it as like a magic Mako land, where President Shinra wants to build this Neo Midgar. He wants to capitalize and find this promised land. He believes that the key to this promised land is through the ancients, or the Cetra, and that's the reason why he's experimenting and researching Ifalna. And then when Hojo witnesses that Aerith is making these drawings and President Shinra wants to really capitalize on this,
Shinra's after it because they believe it's rich in Mako. Mako they've got no right to claim.
He believes that through her drawings, he will be able to find this promised land. So after she starts drawing, they essentially force her to keep drawing. She draws all sorts of things. So what President Shinra does, he forms a unit called the Special Survey Unit, or the SSU. Recruits can sign up, and then they will be given a photo of a drawing with coordinates on the back. The helicopter takes these recruits to these so-called places, which at many times, these are weird photos of drawings made by a 7-year-old girl. And the coordinates are guesses. They could be educated guesses, or they could just be random coordinates that these recruits are supposed to go. And the helicopter doesn't land. The recruits just parachute in, and then 10 days later, another helicopter comes in to pick them up. One of the characters in the story, Jack Klein, he's a pilot, and he says that most of the recruits that parachuted into these places, he never heard from again. And he never heard of anyone finding any sort of magic Mako land or anything like that. So in another flashback, ST tells a story of when he was back in AERITH'S room as a child. And he was usually there with his mother, but some creature kept for an experiment had escaped, and his mother rushed off to help search for it. So AERITH had grown tired of drawing, and ST, who at this time was just a 9-year-old boy, insisted to her, "Just wait, Getty's gonna fix it. I know he will." 2 weeks prior, they had given Getty something they referred to as the special picture, and Getty took the picture and then essentially disappeared. A young woman in a white coat leaned into the room and asked, "Have you finished a picture, AERITH?" The young boy snapped at the woman. "She's drawing now. Her pictures aren't that simple, you know. Stop rushing her." The woman got angry and entered the room, leaving the door ajar. ST shouted at her to close it due to fear of the escaped creature, but it was too late. A dark shape burst in through the open door. The creature let out a short scream. She was a woman enveloped in a black robe-like shroud. She descended upon AERITH and started screeching in a strange voice. "AERITH, you're the reason he's dead. It's your fault. Your pictures have killed so many people. Do you understand that? Do you?" The woman screamed and wrapped her hands around 7-year-old AERITH'S neck and began to choke her. The woman in the white coat plunged a hypodermic needle into the robed woman's neck. The robed woman collapsed on top of AERITH. The boy could see that the number 24 was tattooed on the woman's ankle in deep black ink. So we don't find out what the quote-unquote special picture is until towards the very end of the story. So ST said that the president believed that the mysterious abilities of an ancient would make him a lot of money. And after AERITH started drawing, she became different. She didn't eat, nor smile much, nor dance, nor read books anymore. He finally saw AERITH again, and she was emaciated like a sick puppy. Her long hair hung loose and tangled, and her clothes were stained. He was overwhelmed by one of the walls, which was completely covered in drawings of crowds and landscapes and strange animals. Just before entering the room, ST's mother asked him to convince AERITH to draw. AERITH said that the president and the professor only wanted landscape pictures, and she said she couldn't draw because she doesn't see things anymore. ST told her to draw from her imagination, but AERITH replied, "No, never. Someone will die if it's not a real place. The professor said so." So ST came up with an idea. He would tell her to draw a picture exactly like he tells her, and he'll make sure it's the last one for her. She agreed. He described the landscape of Midil to her, which he had seen in a magazine that his mother had been reading. He then rang the emergency buzzer and called out to Getty Bach. He handed Getty the picture and spoke in a low voice. AERITH gave everything she had to draw this picture. She said this landscape came to her more clearly than any of the other ones, but it took all her strength to draw it, so I really don't think she can do anymore. Will you tell Professor Hojo? Getty saw that the drawing was of Midil. So the story goes into a lot of detail, how in the end Getty used the picture for himself, and in the process lost the light of his own life, as well as 2 other people's lives. And this other character named Joan lost all of her friends. I might make another video focusing on those aspects of the story, because that's very interesting as well. I did additional research, and these other characters named Getty and Glenn and Lalisa ended up becoming Sephiroth clones. There are short scenes in this story. I don't think they're meant to be creepy or scary, but the imagery to me kind of gave me a creepy feeling. then just the hooded robes, especially like Lilisa, this grown woman in a hooded robe descending upon 7-year-old Aerith, starting to choke her and then collapsing on top of her. That really creeped me out as well. And then these characters, these robed characters, kind of end up in the train graveyard. They're not really doing anything. They just kind of gather and then they end up standing still and like look up. Again, I didn't want to go too much into detail about those characters because I feel that's like a separate video. But for this video, I just wanted to focus on Aerith. So at the end of the story, this main character, ST, who in present day, he's like a 24-year-old man with a partner and a soon-to-be-born child. He's dealing with this guilt. And guilt is a running theme in Final Fantasy VII because Cloud feels a lot of guilt, how he can't forgive himself for what happened and he feels like he's no good to anyone. That kind of theme is carried on into Advent Children. This story has a strong theme of guilt as well. He kind of wants to make sure everything is good in terms of his past and everything is clear before his child is born. Before he can face the future, he has to face his past, which is also a theme of Final Fantasy VII. This other character named Joanne tries to help ST understand that Geddy's greedy motivations as well as Shinra's research and development division getting involved is what led to so many lives being lost, and ST shouldn't blame himself. So this character Joanne then tips him off that there's a girl who sells flowers in a plaza in front of the Sector 8 station, and she's pretty sure that her name is Aerith. At the end of the story, ST ventures off to the Sector 8 station and finds Aerith, who's selling flowers. He carefully approaches her and then proceeds to give his name and then talks about his childhood memories of her, everything that he could remember. He tells her that he needs to apologize to her to move on, but rather than search for her directly, he just kind of went round and round on detours. But she starts to say that she thinks he might have the wrong person. So he says, "No, that can't be. You're Aerith, right? Ifalna's daughter, the ancient." But upon seeing her face lock up tight, he finally understood that he was a part of her past, a past that she had no desire to remember. He then apologizes and tells her to forget everything that he just said. He then runs off towards Sector 7 but stops to take one glance back. He sees that she's looking at him. She makes like a funny face back at him, similar to a funny face that they used to do when they were kids. And then she lets out a small giggle and then she gives him a tiny wave. So I think it's a really great story told in a really interesting way, jumping back between flashbacks and the present. Honestly, it gives a lot of insight into the character of Aerith, who we all know and love. But what's interesting about it is Aerith isn't necessarily the main character in it. She's only shown in flashbacks until the end. She's barely in it at the end, but it's mainly told through this unnamed main character. And Aerith is a strong character in it. She's a strong plot point in the story. There's a lot of interesting insight into her story as a child and kind of the trauma that she had to go through and how in a moment in the present she didn't want to remember any of her past. That's kind of, it makes me like really sad. It's kind of tragic how she experienced this trauma in the past and she doesn't want to remember her past. She doesn't want to live it or relive it. It really makes me feel for her as a character, how she never reveals or talks about this stuff to any other characters. I feel that she's just kind of stuck in this life where she's destined to do something. She's destined to like suffer and she can't escape it, which kind of leads me to Final Fantasy VII Remake, how at the end of Remake Part 1 she's talking a lot about destiny and fate. If we walk through this void, it'll change us, it'll change everything, it'll change fate as we know it. So it's a really interesting story. I'm focused more on Aerith, but there's a lot more to the story, even though it is a short story. It goes through the main character and his meeting all of these people to find out the truth of what happened in his past. So that might be another video. If that sounds interesting to you, like going into more details as the character of this unnamed Shinra trooper, as well as Joanne and Lilisa, Glenn and Geddy, and Jack Klein, the pilot, let me know. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Take care, stay safe, stay odd, and keep on playing.